guys, welcome. How are you? I hope you're doing good. I hope you're having a wonderful day. I'm gonna talk about the books that I read in October, and I hope that you enjoy that. Okay, so I didn't read a ton of books this October, but I do have a lot to say about all of them, so this is going to be a little bit of a longer video, so strap in, buckle up, grab yourself a nice cup of tea, or maybe some juice, maybe a good old glass of water, whatever you want. You're your own person. But yeah, let's just get this thing rolling. Okay, so the first book that I read this month was Exes and Ohs by Amy Lee. This book follows our main girl. Her name is Tara, and she has just broken off an engagement with a really shitty guy. And so she's kind of desperate for a place to live, so she moves in with a guy named Trevor, who she knows through mutual friends, but she doesn't know that well. Trevor's a fireman. He's pretty cool, he's pretty chill, just kind of hangs out in the background of the story for most of it. Tara is absolutely obsessed with romance, and all she wants right now is just be in a relationship, there's nothing wrong with that. She just wants a boyfriend really bad. And so she hits up all of her exes, and she's basically just trying to see if she could rekindle anything there. But Trevor is in the background, being all hot and sexy and fireman-y, helping her out, being a good guy, and eventually they fall in love. I mean, it's a romance novel, guys, what were we expecting? Nothing but a happy ending, right? So eventually they fall in love, and this book just kind of chronicles their story and their relationship and how they got to that point. So this book was pretty good, but it was a little underwhelming, if I'm being honest. Like, it was just a very solid run-of-the-mill romance novel. Not bad, but nothing to kind of blow my socks off. I think the main thing that I enjoyed about this book was all of the commentary on the term crazy ex-girlfriend, and all of the emotional manipulation that women endure during dating in this day and age, and the sort of near constant gaslighting that happens because women are deemed emotional, or they overreact, or they get clingy or too attached, when in reality they're just people who want to be loved, and they're dealing with men who are emotionally manipulative and insensitive and use that emotional manipulation to cover their own inadequacies as a person who's ready to have a relationship. Basically what I'm trying to say is that there's a lot of commentary about how men kind of suck in relationships, and about how women have to take the brunt of that while they're in the relationship, but then also get ridiculed for it afterwards as well. I thought the commentary on that was done really, really well, and I thought that our main character, Tara, was a very good character to have that commentary with. I also really, really enjoyed that they were not possessive of each other in the time in which it led up to them getting together. They see each other go on dates with other people, and it's insinuated that they are having sex with other people for a little bit before they're dating, and it's also insinuated that they're both casually dating a lot of people at the same time. And I loved the way that was presented as not a bad thing, because I think that people, it's really easy. How do I explain this without sounding like an asshole? Commitment is really important to people, and exclusivity is really important to people, and I think that obviously that should be honored when that is the agreement upon the relationship. But also, there is a level of dating that is incredibly casual, that I may go on a date with this guy tonight, and I may go on a date with this girl tomorrow, and that's totally fine as long as everybody knows what's going on, and as long as everybody is consenting to that. There's literally nothing wrong with that. And I love the way that was presented in this story. That's exactly what Tara is doing for most of it, and it's never presented as a bad thing, and she's never demonized for it, and she's never made out to be too slutty or anything like that. And Trevor's doing the same thing, and he also is not demonized for that, and I think that was really nice to see. I really liked it a lot. And I liked how there wasn't any jealousy moments in this story. They fall in love pretty casually, like through friendship, I would say. And there's never a moment in the story where jealousy becomes a thing. There's never a moment in the story, like, they don't find out their feelings for each other because suddenly they're jealous of him touching another girl or whatever. I just really hate when that is the catalyst for finding out your feelings for somebody. I like when they're introspective enough to realize that they've developed feelings for somebody. I liked when they know themselves well enough to understand that. I just think that's so much more natural and so much more believable to me. I don't know. There's two main things that I did not like about this book. The first one was that I think the plot felt a little bit all over the place. I think that there was, maybe not all over the place, but rather just a little underwhelming. There was a lot of opportunity for some really interesting stuff to happen because Tara does go on a lot of dates with a lot of different characters, and so there's an opportunity to make that like really funny, really interesting. Like the setting could be in a lot of really cool places. The guys could have been really quirky characters. But I think for the most part that just didn't happen. I mean, it was just pretty plain. They were pretty casual, pretty run-of-the-mill dates. And I think that was really a missed opportunity not to take advantage of that more. I also really think that the story could have benefited from dual POV. You only get Tara's point of view, and Tara has dealt with a lot of relationships where men are gaslighting her, and she's been told quite often that she makes a big deal out of nothing, especially in relationships. And so she downplays everything that Trevor does, and all of the little moments where they would have been falling in love, she's so worried that she's making a big deal out of nothing that she downplays all of it. And so as a result, it kind of downplays it for the reader as well. And so you don't get those little like nuggets and those little like moments where you're like, oh, like that's kind of cute. He might like her or she might like him. Like all of those little moments, they're like kind of just trampled on, for lack of a better word. I don't know how to describe it, but they're downplayed, they're belittled. And so when they do finally fall in love and admit their feelings for each other, it feels very out of nowhere. It feels a little shocking, I won't lie, or a little rushed. And I think that if we had gotten Trevor's point of view, we would have seen Trevor falling in love with her, and we would have seen him realizing his emotions, and we would have it would have confirmed for us all of the moments that Tara doubted. And I think it would have made it feel a little more seamless and a little more smooth. And I also think that Trevor would have felt like a more well-rounded character. We would have known more about Trevor. Because a lot of the story is spent watching Tara date other men. So we learn about Tara and we learn about these other men, but there isn't a lot of room for Trevor to shine. And I think if we had gotten his POV, we would have gotten to see him shine just a little bit more, you know? So I really want to start doing themes at the end of my reviews, because a review is me just telling you what I like and don't like about it, but there are often times when I don't mention things that are really big about the book because I only have so much time. And so I'm going to start mentioning themes at the end, because I think that could give you a good insight into other stuff that happens in the book that I did not mention. Themes for this book include the near constant gaslighting that women endure while they're dating in this day and age, the pain that can come with finally addressing a fear that runs very deep within you, and the struggle that it takes to really get through that, and what it takes to really be emotionally available in a relationship and what that really looks like, and the process to really getting there. I gave this book 3 stars, and I think you should read it if you like genuinely really funny writing in your rom-coms, if you like The Bachelor type TV shows or books, and if you like a little bit of social commentary sprinkled in with your romance, then I think this one might do it for you. The next 2 books that I read were the last 2 books in the Avalon Bay series. So before I talk about either of these, I think that it's like very important to point out that Elle Kennedy, her books are good just because like you can tell she's practiced. Like she's written how many romance novels by now? Like I pick her books up when I want a good romance that I know is going to be easy because the plot is always very consistent. She's very good at creating well-rounded characters. She's had a lot of practice creating those little moments of love, creating that happy ending at the end. And so really all you have to worry about is whether or not you're going to jive with the characters as people. And I really, really appreciate that. And I think that that is the backbone for both of these books. And it's the reason why I enjoyed both of these books is because they're just well-crafted novels. She has practiced her craft, and she's good at it. I just felt like that was important to point out. So, Bad Girl Reputation, the second book in the Avalon Bay series, follows Genevieve, a girl who is like the resident Avalon Bay bad girl. While she was in high school and while she was an early adult, set fires to buildings, ran from cops, stole cars. Like, she's not just a bad girl, like, in theory. Like, she's a criminal, low-key. And she is known for all of this criminal activity and wreaking havoc with her on-again, off-again boyfriend, Evan Hartley. The book starts off with her coming back to town because of her mother's funeral. And she's grappling with, like, how she feels like she should be sad because it's her mother. But in reality, her and her mom didn't really have a relationship. And so she's not really sad because she didn't really know her mother. And so she's grappling with that feeling, and you find out that she has left town about a year ago, just up and left one day. Packed her car, drove away, didn't tell anybody she was leaving, didn't tell anybody where she was going, didn't tell anybody why she was leaving, she just up and left. But you do find out that she left so that she can turn over a new leaf, and she no longer wants to be like this bad girl. She wants to live a life, and she wants to get her shit together, and so she up and leaves because she doesn't feel like she can do that in Avalon Bay because of her history there. You also find out that she up and left Evan. She did not tell Evan where she was going, and it broke Evan's heart, and he was absolutely devastated. And now that she's back in town, Evan is determined to show her that they can be good together, even if that means turning over a new leaf for both of them. The main thing that I really, really loved about this book is that it took the bad, like, girl/guy trope and really turned it on its head. I think when you go for a bad boy, bad girl book, like, that's the allure, that's the appeal, is that they're bad people, and you kind of get to live vicariously through them to an extent, right? But in this book, it really flips it on its head because they turn into better people. What about the kids who do bad things when they're younger, who decide that they no longer want to do them, right? And it explores making amends and asking for forgiveness and apologizing in a really sincere way, because you genuinely want to be better and do better. And I really loved their character arcs and how they both were given a second chance and a third chance and a fourth chance, and how it showed the really messy path to becoming a better person. I thought that it was really well done. I thought that both characters felt genuine and authentic. I don't know anybody who would act this way, so I can't say real. I can't say that they felt real to me, but it wouldn't be surprising to me if they did exist somewhere in the world. They felt like real people. They felt like they could be here. They're very well rounded. They had very good backstories, very good relationship with each other. Speaking of their relationship, y'all, there is a lot of sex in this book. Like, this book is just a lot of smut. If you're looking for closed door, this is not the place you should be. The beach scene, y'all, the beach scene. If you read this book, you know what I'm talking about. That scene was hot summer nights and what it really means to be passionately obsessed with somebody, and how good sex can be when someone knows your body and the things that you love. Yeah, it was a lot. There's a lot of sex in here. Moving on. I really, really loved the main guy in this book. This guy would be the epitome, the quintessential golden retriever boy if he had grown up in a good and loving home environment, but he did not get the opportunity to. And so instead, he's like this kind of jaded but really hopeful boy who just wants to love and be loved and to be accepted and to be cared for and to care for the ones around him. He just wants to love Genevieve and have a family and provide for her and care for her. And he doesn't care what that looks like. When Genevieve decides that she's going to be a better person and she's going to stop doing all these bad things, he's like, okay, if you're going to do it, I'm going to do it. And then he really does become a better person, and he really does get his life together. And they come back together better people for it. And I really loved him. I had a lot of feelings for this boy. I felt very bad for him. He just needs a hug and someone to love him. And I really enjoyed that. Yeah, I thought it was good. Themes of this book include starting over and making amends, alcoholism, and how kind of casually active that is in American society, and how we're not really ready to talk about that, and just falling in love when you're young and learning how to make it work all the way up until you're older, until you're living your lives together. It was super sweet. I gave this book 4 stars. I had a really good time with it, and I think you should read it if you like smut and new beginnings. So I also read The Summer Girl, which is the last book in the Avalon Bay series. And what I will say about this book is that I think it really suffers from like 3rd book in a trilogy syndrome that's happening specifically within romance novels now. I feel like a lot of authors in the romance genre, instead of writing standalone books for the hype and for the publicity, are writing a lot of spin-off novels and then sticking them all together in a series. And I understand why that's a good publishing move, but I think that the 3rd book often flops, in my opinion, or is not given the proper time to breathe and develop and become its own book, because it is being like shoved into this like prerequisite of being a part of this series. And I think this book also kind of fell into that same category. I think if it had been a standalone novel, it had been given the opportunity to breathe and to develop the way that it needed to out from under the umbrella of the first 2 books, and it would have made it a little better. So, in my humble opinion, you might want to read this one first and then flip to the other 2 afterwards. It might let you enjoy this one a little bit more. Anyway, this book is about Cassie and Tate. Cassie is a college girl who's coming to Avalon Bay to visit her father, who's a little bit estranged from her. Her parents are divorced, her mother is a narcissist, and her father did not fight for custody of her, and she is really hurt by that. She doesn't understand why. He got remarried and started another family, and she feels a little bit like she's been replaced. And Tate is the resident golden boy, playboy, pretty boy kind of type of person, but without the meanness. He is super sweet and everybody loves him, and he may always make sure that everybody who he sleeps with or dates or whatever knows that he's not in it for the long haul, and that he really just kind of wants a casual bit of relationship, and everybody's gonna part their way, part ways in the end, and they're all gonna be good with it. And Cassie just so happens to be looking for a summer fling when her and Tate meet at a bonfire. And yeah, the story just follows the 2 of them and their relationship and how it develops. I really loved how this book, similar to Exes and Ohs, I really loved how this book was not possessive in their love. They were very casual with each other, and it was very refreshing to see like a genuinely like deep and potentially everlasting love develop out of such of a casual relationship. I feel like when we think of love, we often think of it as like this thing that we dive headfirst into that has all of this passion and all of these emotions behind it and all of these like big strong feelings that overwhelms us and becomes this big part of our life. And I think that while that is true for some people, a lot of people just sort of casually fall into a relationship, and then the relationship just becomes this really dependable, strong, trustworthy thing that you can rely on, and then the love develops from that. And I think that's very reminiscent of how Cassie and Tate fell in love, and I really enjoyed that aspect of it. So some themes of this book include familial legacies, how to navigate that parenting relationship when you're in your like early 20s, so you're not quite an adult, but you're not quite a teenager anymore, and you have to learn how to navigate what your relationship with your parents really looks like. Casual relationships and casual dating, flings, sailing, and the ocean, and ocean vibes, and also finding strength and inspiration from the person that you are dating. I gave this book 3.5 stars, and I think that you should read it if you love small town romances, you like that nice beachy ocean vibe, if you like emotionally mature younger main guy characters, and by younger I mean like early 20s, not like young. And if you're in the mood for just a good solid romance novel, it's just a good solid romance, I think this one might work out well for you. Okay, so next I read 2 YA fantasy novels, and I was humbly reminded that I am no longer 17. These books were very mid to me, and I think the reason why is because I'm just not 17 anymore. I'm just not in that target audience for this kind of novel anymore. The first one that I read was A Consuming Fire, and this follows our main girl. Her name is Anya, and she is a twin sister, and they grow up in this village together where girls are raised specifically to become sacrifices for this mountain god that lives like in their country, basically in the land that they live in. And so each of these girls are raised to be a sacrifice, but none of them are supposed to die. They travel to this mountain, they give something up, and then they come back and they're supposed to be able to live the rest of their life. Oh, my foot's asleep. That's scary. That's super scary. Okay, let's get readjusted here. Anybody else get absolutely terrified when they start to feel their feet or their hands or something fall asleep? Worst feeling in the world. I hate it. Anyway, so they're supposed to give something away, but they're supposed to come back and be able to live the rest of their life, basically. And what they give away really varies from person to person. So, like, one woman gave up both of her hands, another woman gave up her ability to have children, another woman gave up her memories, all of them. Anya's twin sister decides that she is going to volunteer to be a sacrifice this year. And so she goes and she comes back and she dies. And she's the first sacrifice to die, and Anya is sort of immediately filled with this like grief that is so big that it can only turn into vengeance from there. She has no ability to handle her grief at all. It's so big inside of her that like it has to manifest itself into vengeance. And she decides that she's going to kill the mountain god. And so she travels to go do that. And the story follows her on that adventure. So I think the thing about this book that I disliked the most was that the plot was very stereotypically YA fantasy. Something happens to the girl, inciting incident that changes her pretty deeply at her core. She goes off an adventure. Turns out that she's not quite what she originally thought she was. She meets a boy, falls in love with the boy, and then she does the thing and she comes home. Very, very stereotypical YA fantasy plot, very stereotypical YA fantasy things happen, and I just have read them so often in so many other YA fantasy books that I was like, look, I can't handle this right now. What was really well done in the book that I really, really enjoyed was all of the folklore and the history of the book. So this entire land that she lives in is broken up into like these little different villages and stuff, and each of these villages like treats the mountain god in a different way. So in her village, because they're grown up to be sacrifices, it's meant to be something that they're sort of afraid of, but also that they know that they have to do. So they use like bones and stuff to protect themselves, and they hang up these little trinkets and they tell these little stories and stuff. But then in another part of another part of this land that she lives on, I don't know how to describe it because they're not countries or states or anything, but like in another part, in another group of people, they absolutely worship this man. They like bow down to him, they pray to him, they believe that he is this like all-knowing, all-powerful being, and so they worship him and they perform these rituals and these traditions like for this guy. And then in another part of the world, they are like absolutely terrified of him. They think that he's just a bully and that he's an awful person. And each of those religions are very, very well fleshed out. They're very thought out. The traditions, the rituals, the things that they do, they're very, very well planned. They're very well done. And so that aspect of it, like the religion and the worshiping and that sort of thing, that was very, very interesting to me. I really liked that part. I also really loved the history and the folklore of this, like, where she lived, of this world. I loved the like stories that were passed from person to person, and that bit of it, that like magical flavor. I really liked it. I thought that was really, really well done. What I deeply did not like about the book was the main guy. He was weird and flaky and untrustworthy, and she continued to forgive him over and over, though he did almost nothing to deserve it. It felt weird that he was there. He did not do a lot, and I feel that he was not super necessary to the story. I'm not gonna lie, you guys. Someone is mowing the grass outside. I only have like 2 more hours to film this video, so I apologize for that, but it's just gonna be there. Okay, so some themes of this book include discussion around good and bad and what that really means, who's good, who's bad, and how do we decide that, whether love really can be unconditional or if it is always sort of inherently conditional, finding and accepting family where you are and the strength in that, and also the strength in sisterhood and how that can really be a driving force in somebody's life, family, and specifically sisterhood. I gave this book 3 stars, and I think you should read it if YA fantasy is kind of your jam, but you're not super, super engrossed in the genre, so that things feel a little bit more fresh for you. And if you like to read about religion and worshiping and gossiping and spirituality and what that's like. The next book is called Forged by Fire, and honestly, my feelings about this book are pretty similar to the last one, and also this one is kind of hard to explain in a way that doesn't give stuff away, but also gives you enough to have something to hold on to. So I'm going to try my best, but also I suggest just looking at the synopsis. So basically, it follows our main girl, Debbie, and she comes from a long line of ancestors who have magical powers. And they're called the Eluso. The people who do not have magical powers, they are called the AJ, the Aja, I don't know how to pronounce it, but they are hunting down Eluso and killing them because they are scared of them and their power. One day, her and her mother heal a little boy, and they are discovered for having magic, and her mother is executed, and she manages to get away. Demi manages to get away, and she starts to hide out with these people that kind of keep her safe for a little bit. But one day, she gets the opportunity to save her entire race of people by kidnapping the AJ Prince and using his life to bargain for the lives of all of the rest of the Eluso. So I had 3 main gripes with this book. The first one is that everybody was entirely too young for the stuff that they were doing. I know that trauma is supposed to make you more mature, and it's a fantasy novel, so you're supposed to just be able to suspend your disbelief. And I think the trauma thing is like part of the reason why it was there is because you're supposed to think that these kids were really young so that we could understand the depth of their trauma. But also there was stuff happening, and I was like, these are just children. These are just children. They're children. I just couldn't get past it for a lot of what was happening, and so that really, really took me out of it. I felt like the plot was really, really all over the place. They really are just traveling from one place to the next, to another, to another, to another. And I think the reason for that was to be able to give you insight into all the different areas that they're going, and all of the different like spirituality aspects and the mythology aspects and the history and the traditions and etc. Of each of these different lands. But it felt a little disjointed, and it made that feel like a discovery plot. There was a lot of times in which we would go places and I was like, why is this where we would go next? Or people would do things and I was like, why is this what we did? It felt very discover plot-y, and I'm not a discovery plot type of person. I just don't enjoy that kind of writing. And so I think that made it really hard for me to enjoy this book, honestly. The third thing that this is the thing that got me. The main girl is a very, very tough lens to see this story through. She's integral to the history of the land. I mean, her people are like the equivalent of like the indigenous people to this land. and they're being slaughtered. And so it makes sense that she would be the one that we hear the story from, because she's the side of the story that we need to hear the most. But her personality made it so hard to, like, she's just indecisive, she's wishy-washy, she's unsure, she's insecure, and it makes it really, really hard to make your way through the story, because there's times when she's deliberating about things and you're like, homegirl, pick a fucking side, decide something, otherwise we're not making it anywhere. And I think that was really purposeful, because she's in this situation that is like absolutely crazy, where she has this enormous amount of pressure on her, and she's a child, and so she is quite indecisive, because I mean, she's a child and she has all of this pressure behind her. I'm sure I would be the same way, but it made it really hard to enjoy the story, in my opinion. What I will say, what I did love about the story, which is very similar to the last one, I loved the mythology. It's based on Nigerian mythology, so it's all stories and legends and tales and stuff that I have never heard of before, and so it was really, really fresh, and it was really interesting, and I loved the cultural elements kind of sprinkled throughout everything. I thought that was really well done, and I think that's easily the best part of this novel. And so if you're big into mythology, you should check this one out, honestly. Themes of this book include ancestral relationships, and how honoring your ancestors and taking that pressure on can either really harm you or really help you, depending on how you react to that. Shared trauma, and how that can make you into a community, even though you don't really know each other. And same with shared traits, how shared traits can make you into community, even though you don't really know each other, and how community finds a way to develop and thrive no matter what the conditions are. I gave this book 3.5 stars, and I think you should read it if you like YA fantasy, but you're looking for a little bit more flavor, a little bit more spice to your characters, and if you like learning about new histories and new mythologies. I think you should read this one. I think you'd like it. Okay, I'm gonna take a quick break because my camera battery's dying, my phone battery's dying, somebody's mowing the grass outside. The sun is making me look like I'm getting ready to be exalted and beamed up to heaven, so just give me like 20 minutes. I'll be back. Okay, hello. It was not 20 minutes, it was in fact almost 2 hours. So I'm sure that the lighting is different, and I'm sorry if the camera angle is different. Okay. So the next book that I read is Vampires of El Norte. And this book is set in 1840s Mexico, and it follows Nina and Nestor. Nina is the daughter of a wealthy landowner, and Nestor is like a part of one of the families that work on that ranch. They met when they were 8, and they just sort of attached to the hip and kind of never looked back. But one night when they're 13, Nina gets attacked by a vampire, and Nestor believes that she's dead from the attack, and so he doesn't really know how to handle that, so he just runs away from the ranch and is just disappears basically. Nina obviously did not die, and she is kind of left wondering why Nestor left, why he abandoned her, and just kind of learning where her place is now without Nestor there. Fast forward to 1846, the Americans have started invading Mexico in the Mexican-American War. Nestor gets called home to help protect the ranch that he grew up on. And Nina is still there. She's desperately trying to prove to her father that she is worth keeping on the ranch as a healer, instead of being married off to another wealthy landowner, and kind of helping her family out that way, right? So Nestor comes back and realizes that Nina is not dead, and Nina sees Nestor and is just instantly pissed at him for having left her, and they're kind of trying to deal with that and grapple with that, when slowly it starts to become obvious to them that vampires have not left the ranch and that they are back to kind of wreak havoc. And so the story follows them trying to deal with these vampires, but also trying to protect their land from Anglos, from being stolen from them, from losing the land that they love and the home that they've grown up on forever, that's been a part of their family for years and years and years. So there's like a lot going on in this book. There's vampires, there's cowboys, there's ranchers, there's healers, there's abuelas, there's tias, there's all these people, there's war, there's all these different things going on. And when I started reading the book, I was really, really nervous that like they weren't gonna slot well together, that it was gonna be like confusing, or things were gonna feel like they were just thrown in there. But that's not how it happened at all. This book is honestly like pretty seamless. I don't have a ton, I don't have anything that I didn't like about the book. I really, really enjoyed this one. It was a really, really solid read. I think it was creative, it was inventive. I haven't read anything like it before. It brought to light a story that does not get a lot of attention. It is about the Mexican-American War. That is a part of the story in there. It's told through the perspective of Mexican people who are getting their land invaded, who are having their homes taken from them. And I think as somebody who grew up in the American school system, not only did I not hear about the Mexican-American War growing up, but I only ever heard about it from America's point of view. And I feel like the reason why we didn't really talk about it that much is because it's hard to paint this history any other way. We really did just invade their land and take things from them and kill them and treat them poorly, and then demand that they get out of our country, which was originally where they lived. Like, I just felt like it was really something that I needed to read, something that I needed to be exposed to, and I'm really glad that I was exposed to it in this way. One quick thing that I really, really enjoyed was I really liked the way that the vampires were handled in the story. They were portrayed in a way that I've never really seen vampires be portrayed before, and they were handled in a way that, like, while they were monsters in the story, I can't really say a whole lot because otherwise I think it's a spoiler, but like while they were monsters, they were handled in a way that was like hopeful and inspiring at the end of it, and I really, really appreciated that. I really liked the way that they were handled and what that added to the story thematically. The only other thing that I have to say about this book that is not a criticism, but just is something that I would have liked to hear going into this book. So, a decent amount of this book has Spanish. It is written in Spanish. There are Spanish words thrown throughout English sentences. There are Spanish words for foods and things like that there is no English translation for, really. And obviously that makes it a better story, right? Like, it is set in Mexico. These are Mexican people. It is Mexican culture. Yes, they speak Spanish. Of course they speak Spanish. The book would not be the same if it was all written in English. It wouldn't be authentic. It wouldn't be genuine. It wouldn't be accurate to the story. It would not be the truth if it was all written in Spanish. And I think because it was partially written, if it was all written in English, sorry, not Spanish, and I think it partially added to the story. The story was so good and immersive and atmospheric because the Spanish was there. You were constantly reminded of where we were, who we were dealing with, what these people were going through, because that Spanish was there. And it wouldn't have been the same without it. The story wouldn't have been as good without it. That much is very apparent, very obvious throughout the entire thing. But because I do not speak Spanish, and because I do not know much about Spanish culture and history, I wish what I would have done is gotten some context for the story before I looked into it, or before I started reading it. I wish I would have looked at pictures of the Mexican landscape. I wish I would have known what vaqueros wore, and known like what the healers were like, and what they did, and known what ranches look like, and what jackals look like, and all of that stuff. I wish I would have known that before going into the story. That way I could have been able to picture the story in my head a little bit better and been more immersed in that atmosphere. So if you are going to read this book, and I definitely think that you should, I would recommend looking that stuff up first and looking up all of the Spanish words. Take the time out to do the work, to read the story as it should be read. And it'll be well worth it. It'll be well worth it. So, some themes of this book are class structures in Mexico in the 1840s. American violence and war and what that really looks like from the other side of things, and forgiveness and what that really looks like, and how hard that can be, and how you have to forgive somebody with your whole heart, or otherwise it is not really forgiveness. I gave this book 4 stars, and I think you should read it if you like cowboys. If you are like me and you didn't learn really anything about the Mexican-American War and you need to fix that, and if you would like to see vampires in a little bit of a different light, seen in a little bit of a different way, I think that this book, you might really like it. Yeah. Okay, so the last book that I read this month is called Outlawed. It's another Western novel, and I have never read anything like this ever. Ever. This book is set in America in 1894, and it follows Ada, who is a young girl who gets married when she's 18, and within her first year of marriage, she does not get pregnant. And so the town deems her as barren, which I have a lot of thoughts and opinions on that, but the town deems her barren after she does not get pregnant. And in this town, if you're barren, the people either believe that you were cursed by a witch or you are a witch yourself. Either way, it is believed that you will cause other women basically to be barren or to lose their children or to miscarry or to get sick, things like that. And so Ada is accused of witchcraft, and she has to leave her town in order to survive and not be hanged. She goes to this convent where she starts to read these books about midwifery and barrenness and like women's ailments and stuff like that, and she starts to learn about this doctor who lives in Colorado who studies women who are barren to try and figure out why that is the case. And so she kind of takes this up as her new destiny in life, basically. And so she breaks out of the convent and she is trying to make her way to Colorado, and she runs into this infamous gang called the Hole in the Wall Gang, and they're kind of known around town as like this group of men who just like show up, cause havoc, rob people, and then like leave, basically. And so she falls in with this gang, and turns out that they are not men like everybody expects, but they are actually women, and they are all barren, and they have all been driven from their hometowns as well, and they have a plan to protect barren women and to make a safe space for them. And I'm going to leave it purposely ambiguous because that is really the plot of the book, and it's good. This book was a ride. There is so much stuff that happens in this book. It's one of those plots that just keeps going and keeps going and keeps going and keeps going, and it was really well done. I was never bored, not a single moment. And all of the things that happened felt very real. They felt very much like that would be what would happen next. The main thing that I really loved about this book is that it had a lot of commentary in it about sacrifice and what that really means for like a society or a community that you live in. There's a section in the book, or there's a scene in the book where Ada is talking to the sheriff of her town, who she's known her whole life, who has like condemned her of witchcraft and basically sentenced her to death. And he's like, this is just your place. Like when people experience something as awful as losing a baby or as being unable to conceive, they need answers for what happens. They need someone to blame. They need something to put their grief onto and to place their fears and their anxieties on. And unfortunately, because of how your body is, you are that sacrifice. This is your place. You have to be the person to blame. And I mean, don't get me wrong, that's absolutely terrible. Like, that's not what you should say to somebody. And this girl dying is not going to make these people feel better about having lost their child or about being unable to conceive one. It brings up this conversation of like what people really will do to feel like they're in control of their life. We have such a hard time living our lives without answers. We have such a hard time accepting that sometimes bad things happen and they just happen. And it just is what it is. We have such a hard time with that. And we really will go to so many lengths and do so many really terrible things just to feel not like that, just to feel like we have control, just so that we don't have to confront the truth that sometimes bad things just happen. And I loved how that topic wasn't just brought up within the obvious villains of the story, but also within Ada herself and with all of the people that you're rooting for. Ada does some really terrible things to get to Colorado. She kills people, she burns buildings, she robs people, she takes people's livelihoods from them. And yes, she is just trying to survive. In a lot of ways, she's forced in this situation, but also at the same time, they are choices that she's making. And she is doing unimaginable things that she never would have thought, just so that she can get answers, just so that she can feel like there's more control over her life. And I really enjoyed how not only were the villains the one who were doing this, but also the people that you're rooting for, and how that theme was really mirrored in both of them. I thought that was really well done. It was very good. It was excellent. I really, really liked it. Okay, so some themes of this book include that like very specific brand of like 1800s witchcraft, and like the fear around it and the hysteria around it, midwifery and gender fluidity, and how that existed during a time in which society would like us to believe that it did not exist, and how not only did it happen, but it also thrived, and a lot of people found place and community within it, and that's pretty cool. I rated this book 4 stars, and I think you should read it if you have been looking for a Western novel but you cannot find one that centers women. You like conversations surrounding to be or not to be a mother and what that really means as a woman. And you like a plot that just never stops rolling, that just is always giving you something brand new. Alright guys, that's it for me. I'm exhausted. This video has been hard to film. I appreciate you for sticking around. I know it's a long one. If you've made it this far, I just want to say thank you endlessly. I appreciate you for being here. If you could like and comment and subscribe and do that whole thing, I would be forever grateful. And yeah, I will see you guys somewhere else on the internet. Okay, bye.